Just to also point out, we brought some of our own show and tell for you to look at. We have the traveling exhibit that the Fredericton Region Museum did on New Brunswickers in the Great War that you can have a look at in the back room. And I also, somewhere, I'll set those up once I'm done. Up here, I have the exhibit guide that goes with it, and you're more than welcome to take one with you. So please feel free to take a copy. We also have a couple of reproduction uniforms that the museum developed, so that I can, especially when I go to schools, I can take it with get students, mostly middle school students that I meet. They can dress up in the uniforms. They seem to enjoy that. You're more than free to put the uniforms on later today if you're interested in willing to take a picture of you in uniform. That's something that you're interested in. We have a couple of other items. Some are in the back, some are up here that we brought along as part of that exhibit that we also developed. You may have noticed this box up here. I don't know if you know what that is, but that was commonly referred to by the soldiers during the First World War as a thunder box. It's essentially a porta potty. So if you got caught in the trenches and couldn't make it to the latrine in the back, there's your opportunity to do what needs to be done. And you just remove the little box from inside and deal with that. So
throw it at the Hun.
Throw it over the parapet at the Germans, right?
That's my next project.
Yeah. We prefer that you don't actually make use of that one. And there are some other things too that we brought along, so hopefully you enjoy those. Over 600,000 Canadians served in the Great War, and over 1 million Canadians during the Second World War. So it had a major impact. These wars had a major impact on communities large and small, and families all across Canada. And many Canadians who remained at home found ways to contribute to the war effort, some by donating money to various causes, you might say, during the First World War, Boy Scouts, and the Women's Institute, and all kinds of other organizations like that raised money to buy a machine gun for the Canadian troops at the front, or outfit a field ambulance. They also bought war bonds to help finance the war. Some joined the workforce, especially women. Many women joining up for the first time or engaging in the workforce for the first time in their experience, because so many of the men had gone off to war. They also found ways to support troops at the front with comforts, as they were called, darning or knitting socks, sending cigarettes, food, especially sweets, local newspapers, and so forth that they sent over to help keep up the morale of the troops, many of whom were their relatives. And so communities like Carleton County were drawn into the wartime experience in different ways, and I'm sure many of you have relatives who did their bit by joining up and serving in the Canadian forces, armed forces during the wars, or were affected in other ways. And so we're looking forward to hearing your family's stories. So a bit of background firstly. I'm going to be talking about the First World War, and then Lee will talk after me about the Second World War. New Brunswick in general, and Carleton County in particular, contributed large numbers of troops to wartime service in both of the world wars. To me, this is not really all that surprising, because the county had a very close connection with the military before the Great War through the Canadian militia. For a small place, I don't know what the population of Carleton County as a whole was in 1914, but the town of Woodstock numbered about 3,800, 3,900 people at the time of the 1911 census. So it was still a pretty small place. But even in small communities like Carleton County, the pre-war militia had quite a high profile within the community. There were a number of militia units that were stationed throughout the county. There was an infantry regiment, the 67th Carleton Light Infantry, was headquartered here in New Brunswick. It had companies that were located throughout the northwest corner of the province, including here in Woodstock. There were 2 companies, Centerville, Quebec, Hardman, Andover, Evanston, and Wilmot, all had companies of the 67th Regiment. There was, of course, a field artillery battery, the 10th field, seen here, and there's actually a much better copy of this photo that Joanna brought along on the board over here. Taken around the turn of the century. This is Colonel Vidal, who was at one point the Inspector General of Forces, and this is the battery. This is the 10th field battery passing them in review. So right in here, with their those 9-pounders that they had at that point. So did you ever were you able to date that photo?
No, but it's a little earlier than 1900, because I think he was only Inspector General between 1980 and
Okay, so probably just before the war in South Africa. This photo was taken. There was also the headquarters for the 4th Field Artillery Brigade. So there were a number of batteries of field artillery stationed throughout New Brunswick, and then after the Boer War, they grouped the 3 batteries together into a brigade, a field artillery brigade, and it was headquartered here in Woodstock. And at the time of the outbreak of the First World War, the brigade commander was Lieutenant Colonel William Good, who was from Jacksonville. And there's a photo of him as a major right there on that. And he had quite an illustrious career in the militia. He had served 2 tours of duty with the New Brunswickers who went to South Africa, and then during the First World War, the artillery brigade here in town. As well, there was, of course, the first Brighton Field Company of Canadian Engineers, who's the wrong way, that was headquartered here in Woodstock. Here are a couple of the officers in the photo from the period, which in particular, they're still alive, they're moving on as the camera shot. Just a few that I'll point out here. This is Colonel, or at that point, Major Melville, I think he was born in Peel, and was living in, no, actually he was born in Simons, lived in Peel, and I think he was living in Lawrenceville when he died. I'll mention him in a little bit more detail in just a minute. And this is Captain Raven Vince from Woodstock, who was an officer in the Brighton Engineers for the war, and there were others that I'll mention too. So the Brighton Engineers had a very high profile within the community. And then finally, I believe at one time there was a troop from the 28th New Brunswick Dragoons who were stationed here. There were certainly large numbers of men from Carleton County who served with the 28th Dragoons. So there was this large military presence before the First World War. And when war was declared in August of 1914, elements of these various militia units were mobilized for active service here at home. Among other things, guarding railroad bridges. There were a number of men from the Brighton Engineers, as well as, I think, the 67th, who were mobilized for active service, and they protected, guarded the railroad bridges up and down the river valley for a time. Then later on in 1914, throughout the Maritimes, there was a composite infantry battalion that was raised to go to Halifax to provide garrison for protecting the fortifications in the port of Halifax after the Royal Canadian Regiment that had been stationed there left for active service, initially going to Bermuda for a time to replace a British regiment there, and eventually they went over to France as part of the Canadian Corps. So they asked all the militia units throughout the maritime region to contribute small numbers of men. I know the 67th contributed about a platoon of men, and so they joined together in this composite infantry battalion and spent quite a bit of time in Halifax. At the same time, many members from these units, as well as volunteers who had no previous military service, joined newly created units that were being raised for overseas service as part of the Canadian Expeditionary Force. And amongst the first contingent, which eventually formed the 1st Canadian Division and fought at the Second Battle of Ypres, were troops from the Brighton Engineers, who helped to form the first or number 1 field engineer company from the divisional engineers of 1st Division. This is a photograph of them after they were formed up in Camp Cartier outside of Quebec City before they went overseas in October of 1914. There were about, I think about 120 men in total in the first company. The first company of the entire division was commanded by Colonel Melville, the fellow, or at that point he was Major Melville, the fellow who commanded the Brighton Engineers, the militia company from here in Woodstock, took command of the entire first engineering company that was formed for overseas service. And these troops came from all across Canada. So that was quite an honor, I think, and showed you something about the quality of the troops that served in the Brighton Engineers. And there were a number of other officers, including Raymond Vince, who had to take a demotion to lieutenant in order to join the unit, who joined this company. And Colonel Melville commanded the company in France until 1915, at which point he was invalided back and became sick. And then once he recovered from that, he took command of the engineers, Canadian Engineers depot unit that was stationed at St. Jean, Quebec, and was the commanding officer of that for the rest of the corps.
Right?
Yes.
What
Yes,
kind of,
No, just,
No, he was just pointing out.
what kind of duties would an engineer company be assigned?
They were field engineers, so they would be involved in things like digging trenches, demolitions that were going on. They actually, some of them would have seen active service in the front lines. They accompanied raids that were carried on later in the wars. So they were what we would now call combat engineers, I think, to a large extent. And numbers of them were in the thick of the fighting during the Second Battle of Ypres.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can you close some of these shades so we can see?
See the pictures better?
you keep talking, right?
Okay. All right, everybody will jump up. This is my engineering unit here. I'll look after this for us. So amongst the other officers that served in this company, as I mentioned, Lieutenant Vince was with them. Another was another young officer from Woodstock, Franklin Rank, and I'll mention a little bit in more detail in just a minute. But Franklin Rankin grew up in Woodstock. He went to the Royal Canadian Military College in Kingston, and where he graduated. He became a civil engineer, and that's what he was doing when the war broke out, and so he came back here and became a member of the Canadian Engineers. Over time, many others from the county joined the various infantry battalions that were raised in New Brunswick during the First World War, including the 26th Battalion from New Brunswick, as well as the 55th Battalion that was raised a little bit later in the beginning of 1915. It was actually commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Kirkpatrick, who was the commanding officer of the 67th Regiment from Carleton County, the Carleton Light Infantry. I know this gets a bit complicated, it's just talking about all these numbers. There were also other units that were raised that the county contributed heavily to, the 104th Battalion, the 140th Battalion, companies of which from certainly the 140th were stationed here in Woodstock at different points through the middle part of the year. Or the war. Also various artillery batteries and ammunition columns, divisional ammunition columns, and we can talk about this in much greater detail, including the 65th Overseas Battery. And so this is the 65th Battery. It was originally raised here in Woodstock as an overseas battery, but partway through the war, they decided to keep it here and turn it into a depot battery, which meant it became the battery that recruited and gave initial training to all of the men from the province who joined up to become a member of the artillery, in particular the field artillery. And so they would provide them with their initial induction into the Army, and then once they've been squared away, they would be sent overseas as part of reinforcement, perhaps usually, to serve the batteries that were already at the front. And they were stationed here in Woodstock from early 1916 right through until early 1918. They were housed in the Strong and Nodden building, known as the Wrapper Factory, I guess, locally. Last time I talked about this, I said I didn't know where the building was. Somebody told me where it was. Of course, I've now forgotten where the Wrapper Factory was, but I'm sure somebody put that. And so it remained here until early 1918. Some of these soldiers went on to distinguish themselves during the war. As I mentioned, Raven Vince, he eventually rose to become a lieutenant colonel in the Canadian Army and command his own engineering battalion by the end of the war. Another was Burnett Harmon. Some of you may be familiar with him. I don't know how well known he is in the community any longer. He was originally from Kiel. He was a graduate of the University of New Brunswick. He also joined the 1st Field Company as an enlisted man. He fought at the Second Battle of Ypres and other early battles. He was wounded several times, and he was quite highly decorated. He received both the Distinguished Conduct Medal and the Order of St. George, which was actually a Russian award, while he was still an enlisted man. Then he was commissioned as a lieutenant in the infantry, at which time he won the Military Cross. So he was quite a highly decorated fellow from Woodstock. Later on still, he joined the Royal Flying Corps, as did Franklin Rankin. I mentioned that he had served with the engineers as well, and both of them joined the Royal Flying Corps, and both were killed in action, and their names appear on the county senate. And here is the county senate map. Of course, this is actually the Remembrance Day service that was held in 1941. So, yet again, during the Second World War, dramatic methods were used. So, Burnett Harmon was killed in 1918. He's buried at the Villers Bretonneux Military Cemetery just outside of Amiens. Franklin Rankin was actually killed very early in the war in October of 1916. He has no known grave. There's actually quite an interesting story, which I won't go into now, about his grave when he was killed in October 1916. He was buried at the site where his plane came down, and then unfortunately the grave was lost as the battle moved across the battlefield. And there's an interesting collection of correspondence that his father, who was still living in Woodstock at the time, had with the Army trying to figure out what had happened to the grave of Franklin, which had now been lost. And so he has no known grave, and as a result, his name appears on the Flying Services Memorial that's located in Grasse, France. So that's the memorial to the missing Commonwealth airmen who were lost in the First World War. Of course, it was not just men from Carleton County who joined up and served overseas. Nursing sister Anna West, who was born in Centerville and received her nursing training at a Boston hospital, joined the American Red Cross in 1917, and she traveled to Belgium, where she served close to the front for quite some time, and have a reproduction nurse's uniform. It's actually a Canadian Army Medical Corps uniform. I'll show you in just a minute. Don't ask anybody to come up and model and just show it to you. I'm certainly not going to model it. I asked Lee, but he said no too. So.
You have an androgynous name.
Yes, it could go either way. So, but anyway, after the armistice, Nursing Sister West accompanied the U.S. Army, its occupation force, to Germany, and there she was stricken with spinal meningitis. And she was repatriated back to the United States, but her condition worsened. And then in October of 1919, she died at the Walter Reed Hospital in Washington. And her body was brought home, and she's buried locally in the Centerville United Baptist Church Cemetery. And because her death was attributable to her wartime service, her name also appears on the cenotaph. So I'll just show you what the uniform looked like very briefly. So it had a long skirt. They wore the long blue skirts that you see here. And then the nurse would have had a blue tunic that they would have worn over that. And then they had this apron that was worn over that. This is the working uniform of the nursing sisters that they wore over the tunic and the skirt
Can you hold it up? Can you hold it up?
Sure.
That you could put
That I can put on. You're like, Kelly's right there. Come on over here, Kelly.
Is this a reproduction or?
Yes, this is a reproduction. So that's the long skirt. There's the tunic.
There you go, Kelly.
And there is the apron. Over in front of it. This was the sort of scarf that they would have worn, and I have no idea how to tie this around your head. That would have looked something like that, and pull back.
You look great, Kelly.
And then another version, Red Cross armbands that wear on her tunic like that. So there you have it. That's what the nursing sisters wore as their working uniforms with the Canadian Army Medical Corps during the First World War.
Oh,
Take a picture.
Well, yeah.